Please give another huge hand for Nina.
I feel like a little tiny, I don't know, person behind this big stand. But can you guys see me okay? Tansakia, Nia Molina Miawap and Labokam Masmo, Nia Nihia, Kineskumtanawa. It's really good to be here, friends, relatives, respected elders. I would like to begin with thanking the Coast Salish peoples for allowing us on their traditional territories, for allowing me to be a visitor in their homelands. I'm going to move this. It's an honor to be here. Hi, hi. I come from the Lubicon Cree First Nation, which is in northern Alberta. My community is in the Peace River region, which is one of the 3 deposit areas that tar sands extraction is taking place. I come here today to not only share my personal story, but also the story of my family and the community that I come from. As a person who has been politically involved, but also personally involved in Indigenous rights for about 12 years, and more specifically on tar sands resistance for the past 6, I would like to share some reflection on the state of our movement and how we can continue to move this movement forward. But first I want to start with a prophecy. Our prophecies, if you've heard this one, speaks of a time when the blue sky and waters will turn black and green things will die and turn brown. Animals and fish will disappear and birds will drop from the sky. The devastation will come as a result of man's greed and disrespect of Mother Earth. And this time, my friends, is now upon us. Where I come from, the Alberta tar sands is scarring the earth, polluting and draining the watersheds, poisoning the air, and destroying the land. The landscape is drastically changing from a once pristine boreal forest to an increasingly toxic and industrial terrain. Animals and fish have tumors. My dad, who's a hunter, he finds tumors in the carcasses of the moose. People are actually scared to harvest our traditional medicines, to go out into the land and to pick the rat root, to pick the red willow. But even though we're scared, we still do it. And young people in our families are now dying of cancers, rare forms that we've never seen before. And I come from a community, and I say this with a lot of sadness, that I come from a community that until my generation is not able to live sustainably off the land. My dad and my Kokomimusa were able to do that. And now, more than any other time in history, the earth is being destroyed everywhere. It's being destroyed at an unparalleled rate. And, sorry, I lost one of my pages. And people and animals are being sacrificed for the benefit of very few, as we know. So not only are we in ecological crisis, but we're actually in a moral human crisis. And as we know, all around the world, people's homes are becoming toxified and turned into industrialized landscapes, not only in the tar sands, but everywhere around the world. And people's drinking waters are being turned into radiated dump sites. And from this, it's really painful, actually, to see this firsthand. It was over 2 years ago when I returned home to witness the aftermath of one of the largest oil spills in Canada's history. What I saw was a landscape forever changed by oil that had consumed a vast stretch of our traditional territory, the territory where my family's hunted, fished, trapped, where my family was born, where I was born. And days before the federal and provincial government actually even wanted to admit that this had happened, my family was text messaging me and telling me that their eyes were burning, that they're feeling nauseous, that they couldn't breathe. The children were sent home. And they asked me if I could find out how big it was, and they asked me if I even knew if it was an oil spill. But it wasn't until 5 days later, after the Harper government's election, the information was finally released to our community. More than 4.5 million liters had soaked into our traditional territory. But soon after, the story was swept out of the way, out of the media, out of the eyes of the public. And yet, the cleanup still went on for a year, and I've gone back, and it's still not the same, and we know it will be forever changed. And this is one of the reasons why that I continue to fight for the protection of Mother Earth. I think one of my clearest and most powerful memories from being a young child on the land with my Kukum and Musum was actually when we would go in the summer on the horse and wagon. And seeing the vastness of the land, I felt free. I was in awe of the beauty, the lushness, the expansiveness that I could see, and the connection between the sky and the earth. I felt complete then. And though I'm not really sure, actually, if I'm ever going to really feel that way again going back home, because of the extreme resource extraction happening, we have tar sands, we have fracking, we have conventional, we have logging, we have all of it. But I also think that this is a place where I derive my perseverance to continue this fight and to try to dismantle the stranglehold that colonialism still continues to have on our people and the land. And there's social issues, there's political issues, there's economic pressures that are affecting our communities on all sides. It is literally tearing our communities apart. And if you talk to any Indigenous person in this room, you can story after story after story after story, you can hear of how our communities are being torn apart systematically through colonial practices, but also now through corporate agreements that our lands are being leased out. And because this industrial system is predicated on powers of dominance, our systems of power and dominance, it's no wonder that we see these systems play out in our communities, in our families, in our personal relationships, and in our movements. And I think we must too be aware of how these harmful predatory aspects in our society are playing out in our own lives, and how do we actually shed these colonial mentalities of hierarchy, dominance, profit, greed, immediate gratification, and the caring more about our egos and more about our well-being and our needs over others. These are the values of colonialism, and these exist under the form of capitalism. And we need to dismantle the system. And we need to work together and also recenter our values and how we relate to each other and the earth. These colonial values of domination are embedded in values of patriarchy. And this is one of the reasons why we see the raping and pillaging of Mother Earth, and also the violence against women. And I'm not only talking about physical violence, I'm also talking about emotional violence, spiritual violence, psychological violence that's perpetuated in our society and in our movements. We need to question what values we are prioritizing in this movement, and how we shift our paradigm to embody what decolonization looks like, and how we're treating ourselves, how we're treating each other, and how we're treating the earth. If we continue to work from this colonial foundation, we are not recognizing the role and value of Indigenous ways of life, Indigenous ways of knowing and being. And the earth is our mother, and violence against the earth begets violence against women. This is both political This is both a political issue, but it's also a personal issue for many of us. This is the reality of many of the issues that our communities face today. This issue of violence against women is not just a news story. It's not something that we see out there in the world. And it's not a coincidence that over 700 women, Indigenous women, are murdered and missing across this country we call Canada. Indigenous women are 5 times more likely than non-Indigenous women to die from violence. And I'm not bringing up these statistics only because they are outrageous figures. I bring it up because it's also personal for me. This is real in my life. This year I lost 2 women in my family from violence. And one of these women was my cousin, who was murdered by her partner. And one of these women was my little sister, Bella. And my little sister, Bella, who was 25, had just graduated from college in Toronto. And her case is still being investigated as a suspicious death. So this year I've attended 3 funerals within my own family, the other being a suicide. And this is a reality for our communities. Not only do we have to deal with resource extraction in our own backyards, we have to deal with violence in our lives. All life is sacred. All life forms have spirit. So when we destroy the earth, we destroy other beings. We destroy our mother, and we violate the sacred connection that we have with her. For many of us, this work is not just a job, it is a way of life. But I have come to realize that it is not only how we politically challenge these systems of dominance, but how we decolonize and deconstruct them in our daily lives and practices. So we need to decolonize both politically and personally. And this is why I am intent on continuing to decolonize myself. A lot of the questions that I often ask myself lately is, what kind of movement are we building? And what are the values that guide our actions within each day? And what kind of future are we fighting for? Are we living in ways now that create what we envision for the future? Are we treating our families, our loved ones, those in the movement with the dignity and respect that they deserve? Growing up, my dad would talk about how we could learn from the mistakes of Wasakicha, our trickster. He would talk about how Wasakicha would treat the world around, and we would learn from that, of how to interact and respect other beings, other life forms, other animals, the bird nation, the plant nation, the trees. And I try to include these stories in my life, and in how I interact with the world around me. I try to do that in the way that I carry myself, how I try to respect others, how I honor the core being, trying to be humble, trying to be a trustworthy person. These values are very important for me to live by. And I try to incorporate these principles into my daily efforts of personal and political decolonization. In further coming to understand of what Indigenous resurgent looks like, I turn to my teachings, morals, values from our old stories, and this is a way of how we can decolonize. And to conclude, I'd like to finish with the prophecy that I began with. The prophecy also speaks of a time when all people gather in 4 directions, all distinctly separate, but also connected in the circle of life. Those stories, those people actually who have kept their ancient knowledge, traditions, and stories alive shall be the teachers. People from diverse backgrounds and different creeds will begin to work in honesty and respect, and with a deep sense of solidarity for one another. And I pray that a time will come when people from the 4 directions come together to work for justice, for peace, for freedom, in the recognition of Mother Earth and the Great Spirit. Hi, hi.